Welcome to the Seprod Group of Companies Investor Briefing. We're going to be talking about today Seprod's recent acquisition of AS Bryden and Sons holding company in Trinidad and Tobago. We're going to be talking with PB Scott, the chairman of Seprod Group of Companies, and Richard Pandohie, the CEO of Seprod Group of Companies, as well as the interim CEO of AS Bryden and Sons. Let's get going. PB, we're going to kick things off talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
No, welcome. Seprod's market cap overall, roughly, share price $65-70 or so, but the market cap's been about 45 billion. You did release to the market that, the combined entities are going to be about $500 million US, but not much other info yet. One of the things we're discussing today, do you find that the deal so far, the metrics, the price and everything, is it baked into Seprod's market cap at this point?
Not at this point, no. We would expect that in the next 3 to 4 months, probably in the next 6 months, if people see 2 quarters of earnings, they will recalibrate the pricing, and it will certainly, we would expect it to reflect the true value.
And what did you find as the entrepreneur, or the chairman? What was so incredible or great about AS Bryden that got you kind of hot and heavy about the company and made you make that move?
The brands, the people. AS Bryden's has a great platform. It uses a good IT system similar to our IT system. It has fantastic talent in the organization and sells similar brands to what we sell, such as Mondelez, Cadbury's, the Eve brand in Trinidad. We sell the Eve brand here in Jamaica. So it has some similarities, a strong pharmaceutical distribution business, and it allows us to have a regional platform for distribution.
And what other countries, right now, AS Bryden, besides Trinidad, what other jurisdictions?
So they have operations in Guyana. They own a share in a pharmaceutical distributor in Barbados, but they're primarily in Trinidad. That's their large operation is in Trinidad.
Yeah. But when you look at Seprod, right? Let's say last year's audited numbers, roughly 40 billion and change, 2 billion to 3 billion net profit. Just give us a sense, for us, the market, where are kind of some of AS Bryden's numbers that you're looking to kind of for the combined entity going forward?
I think it's better for you to, when you look at any of the businesses that we invest in, to really look at the equity and the return on the equity, and we expect to have a return on equity of between 15 and 20%. And if you were to look at Seprod's numbers, we would expect that Seprod's numbers will be materially different from the $2.5 billion PAT that you saw last year, going forward, certainly. But it's a work in progress. It's a platform, and it's not something that is a photograph and an end product. It's something that's going to continue to develop and hopefully continue to grow.
Yeah, that's great. And Richard, can you give us any sense though of the market share, the revenue, the top line numbers, what type of profitability we're looking at with AS Bryden?
AS Bryden, first of all, is an established entity in Trinidad and Tobago. It's over 100 years old. It's a part of the legacy of Trinidad and in many, many ways. And that's why this acquisition is particularly so exciting, because it was you're taking 2 huge entities. Seprod being part of the fabric of Jamaica, AS Bryden in Trinidad, and combine them to create an entity for the region. In terms of revenue, we spoke a lot about that, around $240-250 million in revenue. And it's probably translated to around 15 to 20 million in profit per year. But the beauty about this deal is less about what each entity is doing by themselves. Because of the potential, the synergies that are going to actualize from the deal, you're going to find a rate of return that is, I think, superior to what exists for most other entities in the region now. There's so much upside potential from a lot of different pillars that it's really exciting. So I look at what we bought, but I'm really more excited about what we're going to deliver out of the transaction.
And Richard, to that point, right? What's unique? You're taking on a dual role for right now. You're a CEO of Seprod Jamaica, or CEO of Seprod Group of Companies, but you're also interim CEO in Trinidad for this company, AS Bryden.
Yeah.
Is that something, for you and the chairman, is that something, for both of you, is that something that will persist for the long term? Do you see a full-time CEO being appointed for AS Bryden? What's the strategy when both of you discuss that?
Well, I think that AS Bryden's it's a group of companies with three main entities, each with very strong leadership within the entities. So in many respects, it's adding three further entities to the Seprod Group of Companies. Regardless of whether you have a CEO of AS Bryden's as a group or not, they will effectively report and be very material the operations to Seprod. So the responsibility for Seprod's financial results and the accountability lies with this gentleman here. So ultimately, we are working through how we are going to structure that going forward. In our group, the Musson Group, which has operations throughout the Caribbean, we tend not to have managers as country heads. Everything is very vertical in the area in which people are managing those businesses. So we will work through that. At the moment, Richard is the interim CEO because ultimately he needs to know every nook and cranny of that business, because he's ultimately responsible for that. We will structure it to best suit the performance of Seprod.
But I'd like to add to what the chairman is saying. So, we talk about going, but when we started this transaction, when you look at some of the critical things, wins that we needed. First of all,
when did the transaction actually close?
June 6th.
In June?
Yeah, June 6, 2022.
So just, in terms of that, the quarter, the June quarter, is it just 1 month in that quarter, Richard? Or roughly how much?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
1 month in the June quarter.
So this quarter, let's say coming up shortly, we're going to get a fully baked quarter between the businesses.
September, yes.
Okay. Excited about it?
Yes.
PB is smiling. That's a good sign.
We're very excited. We've always been excited about the prospect of building out the platform. The platform is great for the distribution across the region. You have to remember that Seprod is a large manufacturer and brand owner, so it's a platform for them to be able to get their products into markets as well. So I think we're just at the beginning of the journey, and the numbers will look good, absolutely. They'll be somewhat materially different from what people have expected previously, but it's the beginning. It's not the end.
And Richard, that's just an important point. I don't know how that really comes out in the numbers and everything, but is there a lot of that synergy you spoke of earlier? Is there a lot of that kind of in, say, the intercompany accounts or so, where there's like exports from, say, I don't know, Seprod now going down to Trinidad and then Trinidad back up to Seprod?
Not at this stage. We have teams looking at mapping all the opportunities. It takes some time to really deliver it. I think by the November, December quarter, you start seeing some of those flowing. But I was making the point that a key part of the Bryden's value is around its relationship with the principals, its staff, the relationship with the consumers. And my initial job was to go in to make sure that those relationships continue, not to have any disruption to that. And we have done a really decent job. All our principals have now, everybody's engaged. We're running as normal. The staff complement, which there were no change to staff complement. We've kept a very positive energy. We've told them there will change. We're positively disruptive, but it's a change to create more value. And certainly within the consumer space in Trinidad and Tobago, it has happened very seamlessly. So those are key wins that will ensure that the base remains intact.
And Richard, when you say principles, right? What's the structure? In Jamaica we have a good idea of the structure of Seprod. We have your annual report, but what's the structure like say AS Bryden? PB speaks to the subsidiaries, but what's it like below you in that org chart? Is it just managers? Does each company have a CEO or a managing director? But what's the vibe like below you and the locations, and just what's the whole makeup of this whole AS Bryden Holdings? Right.
So AS Bryden Holdings has three subsidiaries, three strong subsidiaries. You have AS Bryden Trinidad and Tobago, 100% owned. There's a CEO, there's a senior management team, they have a full structure. There's Bryden Pie, which is 90% owned, strong CEO, also a strong leadership team, and there's FT Fire Fund, 100% owned.
These are retained, as you call them, principals? These are retained,
No.
Call them CEOs that you've kept since acquiring the business?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, so these are subsidiaries that are self-contained with their own CEOs and their own organization. What we refer to as principals are effectively what are customers in terms of Mondelez.
Yeah.
Okay.
We work for Mondelez. We work for Diageo. These are entities that lay out what
great
they want
relationships
us to do.
with, great everything. So sticking to the CEOs, let's say, have you maintained who were there before, or are these new persons that you've put in place?
So we have the existing, what I call the executive management team. The CEOs have all remained. We have actually diversified, actually expanded that structure. We have added a CFO to the executive team, a head of HR or people, critical part of the investment. So we have actually expanded the management team since we have been there. Using people from within the company.
Okay, great. PB, what's your affinity? What's your favorite product so far in the mix? I know it's a ton of products and so forth. It's 3 subsidiaries, as Richard says, but what's something that really jumps out at you, in this new acquisition, new dispensation, that maybe, who knows, maybe you might want to bring it to Jamaica or take it in Jamaica, but...
It's a very awkward question, Mark.
Anything that can mix with supplement or surge? Maybe?
Yeah, some of these businesses have been new to us, not in terms of the theory of distribution, because our core competency is distribution. That's what we do, in brand management, etc. But we've never had a premium liquor business, for example.
Okay.
That's a very interesting business. It's a business that we're learning from a Seprod perspective. However, there's a lot of inbuilt knowledge at AS Bryden's, and that's why the retention of talent is
incredible margins?
No, I wouldn't say any business that we're in has incredible margins, Mark. Everything is very, very competitive.
Is that kind of a tempered answer, or is that?
No, honestly, the environment is very competitive globally, and the days of making 40% margins on bulk diapers are long and truly gone.
Okay.
That's a product that you'd probably make 5% margin on now if you were indeed bothered to be in that industry.
Yeah.
The markets are very, very different from what they were 20 years ago. The principals are very much aware of the value throughout the chain, and our job is to bring value to them. We are very conscious of how much distribution should be, and we try and continually add value and try and create value to them.
Yeah. And Richard, what's exciting to you so far? You're spending, whether it's a couple of weeks in Trinidad, a couple of weeks in Jamaica, you're making this in work, you're in this early transition stage, critical stage of the company. But what's exciting to you so far? You speak about the principals, the staff, very important stuff, a lot of the soft stuff. But what are you enjoying so far?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, you're seeing a strategic plan come into life. Seprod has consistently been talking to Seprod, the chairman and myself, for the last 6-7 years about our domestic market being CARICOM.
Yes.
That's something we have said consistently. And this is a massive and material step towards actualizing that strategic plan. So to be a part of an organization that's not only talking about strategy, but making it come to life is super exciting. And one thing that's most exciting about Bryden's, we talk about the products, etc., but there's a little company called FT Fire Fund, which is the construction element, and they have a major footprint in Guyana. This literally puts us in the fastest growing economy globally. And that to me is exciting because what we're using is each company as a pathway to get other products in.
Was Seprod in Guyana at all before? A minimal extent before?
We sent products on was being distributed. We're there, but this is a material step into Guyana. When we go there now, you can, we're part of Guyana society now. We're part of the growth. And that to me is, so you look at the products, but you also have to look at the channels that have been opened, the gateways, and that is super exciting for me.
That's great. We're going to take our first break, and we're going to come right back to you with Chairman P.B. Scott and CEO and Interim CEO Richard Pandohie. Welcome back to Seprod Investor Briefing. We are here to continue with PB Scott, the chairman of Seprod Group of Companies and the CEO of Seprod, Richard Pandohie. We're going to be talking about, AS Bryden, the acquisition they recently did in Trinidad. That actually the company is also in Barbados and Guyana. We're going to be talking about some of the company's market statistics, stuff like employee, headcount, market comparatives. Just give you some sense of the size of AS Bryden, the deal that Seprod just concluded in early June of this year. Let's get rocking and rolling and kicking it over to Richard. Richard, just to give the market an idea of the size, employee headcount, where is kind of AS Bryden in terms of employee headcount overall?
So AS Bryden is a significant employer in Trinidad. They have approximately 1,500 employees, direct employees.
Okay.
We spread across the AS Bryden Trinidad, Bryden Pi, and Farfund. Bryden's and Pi probably account for over 1,000 of it. In terms of what Seprod was before, we're 1,700 employees. So combined entity across the region is 3,200 employees.
So almost doubling, let's say, Seprod Group of Companies or
yeah,
so.
in every way.
Almost.
From a revenue base, from employee base, we have no move, from being mid. When you look at, listed companies within the English-speaking Caribbean, we're now the largest food distributor and manufacturer in the English-speaking Caribbean.
Okay.
So that
amazing.
is significant.
Yeah, in terms of that overall. And when you look at the market overall, Wisynco has been doing really well. Earnings have kind of rebounded as well in the past 6 months or so. Just to give some perspective, where would you say is like Wisynco's employee count or head count, overall?
Well, I just want to say first of all that if this is a race, we're focused on our lane.
Yes.
And doing really well within our lane and delivering superior return for our shareholders. I think that's where the focus is. Honestly, I'm not looking at making a comparison against other players within the market. I think there's enough scope and space for all of us to do well and bring our region along. But from where I sit, my job is to deliver superior return for our shareholders and to create a value, an entity that is creating value for our region and for our people. Mm-hmm. So it's less about the other companies. Kudos to everybody. I think there's space for all of us. But we want to make sure we're out there doing an excellent job.
But one thing in the analyst community, Richard, and I agree with you, but one thing in the analyst community is everybody wants foodie stocks. That's what I call them, right? So everybody wants, whether it's Grace, it's Wisynco, it's Lasco, we could name all of them. Food is hot, right? You speak to any analyst in the financial sector, they want food. And you guys, to a testament of Seprod, have gone and bought this company, AS Bryden, a company that nobody really knows anything about. So you're bullish on food, plus the other things.
But we're more than food. We're food and pharmaceutical in the healthcare space. So we're in two very strong spaces. When you talk about fairly inelastic products in regards to recession, in regards to, when you look at diversification, we have household and hardware, we have food grocers, we have pharmaceutical, we have healthcare. So what you have now created is a diversified group.
Of course,
that
right.
basically gives an investor a bigger opportunity to mitigate their risk while having significant growth opportunities because of what we have.
So what's the best way, when you and PB are in the boardroom, you're together, you're knocking heads, you're brainstorming. How do you explain, let's say whether you're AGM, you're meeting with the analyst community. Are you a mix of Caramed, Ray and Nephew, Seprod prior to the acquisition? How do you explain what Seprod is or Seprod 2.0 today?
So if you were to, and if you had to put it in that context, we don't like to compare ourselves to anyone, and that's not to demean anyone else. It's
we're keeping in our lane. We're just kind of, if we're just kind of breaking it down.
So we would be
the average investor.
We would be the largest healthcare company in the Caribbean.
Okay.
So if you put it that way, we would be what Caramed is here. We are like that with Facey Commodity. Facey Commodity is comparable to Caramed here.
And healthcare is I'm selling pharmaceuticals.
And we have the equivalent of a Facey Commodity, which is like a Caramed in a Trinidad and a Barbados and a Guyana. So we are one of the largest distributors, if not the largest, pharmaceutical stroke healthcare distributors in these markets in the Caribbean. So that's one vertical. In the food ingredients business, we are fairly developed in Jamaica. We have a wheat mill, a cornmeal plant, and a vegetable refinery, and we do margarine. And we export throughout the region, although the vast majority of those sales happen to be in Jamaica. Though that business does not really have a comparable in Jamaica per se, although we are competing against large multinationals such as ADM, which is in Jamaica, but we don't have a local competitor in that business. ADM is one of the largest organizations in this planet, so it's the commodity business is a global business and requires a lot of scale. On the distribution side of the business, on the food distribution side of the business, the distributors throughout the region really, if you were to look at distributors 15 years ago, we were all competing against each other. What has happened as the sector has consolidated, people have got scale, but they have tended to focus in certain areas. So if you were to compare, for example, Facey Commodity brings the best to you. It's probably the leading third-party brand distributor in Jamaica. It represents Mondelez, Cadbury's, Kraft, Goya. These are top line brands. Plus its own brand, Eve, as well as it represents the dairy division, which is the other leg of Seprod, Supplegen, Betty Milk, Surge Milk, etc. So on the food side, Facey Commodity is quite a significant player. When you mention other companies that are exceptional at what they do, I mean exceptional. Wisynco is an exceptional company. If you look at Wisynco's numbers, return on equity is the most important number, one of the most important numbers, and they have a very high return on equity because they have a great business. That's a beverage business. Facey Commodity has a snack distribution business. That is a different type of business. So it does Butterkiss, it does Mondelez, which is Oreo cookies, it does Cadbury's, plus the other food products in its own brand. So no one distributor can be compared exactly to another distributor.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha on that point. And Richard, on that point, very well put by PB. The two other things that really made the headlines in Jamaica which were quite exciting, and you spoke about synergies earlier, so did PB, is having Eve in 2 jurisdictions, but also the liquor business. In Jamaica we have a huge entertainment sector, even if the liquor business is confined to Trinidad. But just at a higher level, the whole potential of synergies between Jamaica, Trinidad. We're sure a lot of analysts have called you on that. But just the whole Hennessy brand, which has just boomed into Jamaica in the past decade or longer. What's the whole play there? How is that looking in Trinidad? Are there opportunities in other countries in CARICOM, even if not Jamaica right now?
Right. I'm going to speak to just one point first.
Sure.
I want investors to know we keep speaking about Jamaica and Trinidad, but Jamaica and Trinidad are 2 anchor points. Our platform is everything in between also. It's just that you had to be in those 2 anchor points.
And when you say that, is that you mean all of CARICOM?
All of CARICOM. I
Okay.
mean, that's our space we're playing. It's not a Jamaica or Trinidad move. It's our regional move. And these are the 2 anchor points, right? And
But if you could tell us, Richard, what are going to be the material significant markets? We know markets are important.
Barbados is important.
Where's the bread and butter? Where's the money coming from?
No, it's going to come from those 2 key markets. But you're going to need the Barbados, you're going to need the Guyana, you're going to need those markets. And don't forget that it's not only about the population that drives your consumption, it's also about the total amount in that country. So for example, I keep telling people, if you look at the population, look at the visitor arrival, you have to combine those to find the consumption. That's why you carry great brands, right? The brands you carry will be consumed not only by your population, but by the visitors. And in terms of, you speak about some of the premium beverage, so those relationships tend to be within the country. Now, obviously, one of the main point of this move is that prior to this, CARICOM is made up of all these countries, 16 countries or whatever. Look, very complex, very hard to manage. So from an outsider looking in, it's just a complex, logistically very complex. It's hard to manage, but it takes the same time to manage in big markets. When we speak to you now, we're not speaking to you about Jamaica or Trinidad or whatever. We're speaking to you about the region. We're bringing a regional solution to you to unlock the complexity of the logistics and to create value. That's the kind of partner we're going to become. So we are going to take the position and say to you, let us manage your business, let us be your partner for the entire region. We'll figure out the logistics, we'll figure out the people support, we'll do everything. And so basically they become an extension of companies that before, we have to go and find somebody in this country, in that country, in that country. We look for one partner. And that is very important.
So you'll become a regional hub if you're not already.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where the value creation come from. We're going to make 1 + 1 = 3.5, right?
It will be a distribution platform.
Distribution platform, okay.
Multinationals can plug into and have execution in multiple markets at the same time at the same very high level that they expect from us.
Yeah. And what's kind of, the feeling or the vibe like? I mean, Seprod, prior to this, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, you've had brands, Eve and Miracle and, as I said, Butterkiss, I mean, great brands. But you just mentioned, Richard, in what you were saying, you now have premium brands as well with this acquisition of AS Bryden. I mean, does that change the business? Does it change the culture at all of Seprod Group of Companies? I mean, having premium brands and, the brands that you had existing, or that's just a part of the evolution of the group of companies?
Well, we've always, Facey Commodity distributed Kraft and Mondelez, and Bryden's distributes Kraft. Well, it doesn't distribute Kraft anymore, used to, but distributes Mondelez. So they have a similar sort of approach to managing those brands. The Eve brand, you mentioned, it's true, Barbados and Trinidad. Jamaica, Barbados is not part of our portfolio for Eve, Trinidad and Jamaica is, but we also own the Eve brand in the United States, Canada, and the UK. So in time, in the future, those markets will probably be developed as well. And those markets are fairly substantial. I mean, there are sort of 3 big markets with regard to Caribbean produced product, and that is Jamaica, Trinidad, and the diaspora.
Okay.
The diaspora being Canada, the tri-state area, Florida, and the United Kingdom.
I mean, there are opportunities. For example, Bryden's, within their portfolio, there are items that they import that will be able to be produced within the factories in Jamaica.
Right.
So that's going to bring additional, value to our business, and will flow straight to the bottom line. So those are the opportunities we're mapping out now. There are some real exciting ones, especially from dairy category and the biscuit category, etc. And those are just, obvious synergistic.
So is a part of the AS Bryden play, and it's for both of you, just throwing it out there, is there a part of it where, just like in Jamaica, we've seen an evolution, where, the persons would say, we'd never eat sushi, we'd never have a Starbucks, we'd never have Hennessy. I mean, maybe we'll have our own Louis Vuitton store soon. But the thing is a part of with what you've got now in Trinidad with, these Hennessy brands, your champagne brands, your liquor brands, whether you do it in Seprod or you're going to do it at AS Bryden or together, could there be some more aspirational brands that you try and get to plug in with these multinational players? Is that something we see of Seprod going forward, or that's not the dig?
I think at the end of the day, every market is very different, and opportunities come to you not in a linear fashion. They come often randomly, and you have to build an organization that when they do come to you, you're able to have the optionality to execute on them. We're building a platform that we hope that we will be able to execute as opportunities come, if we choose to execute. The reality is that they are very different markets. I mean, you can talk about Trinidad, you can talk about Jamaica, but fundamentally, the per income capita in the 2 countries is materially different. I mean, and a Trinidadian has 4 times as much money than a Jamaican. So the spending patterns and the products that are going to sell in those particular markets are going to be somewhat different. And we're in the market of supplying the market. So we're going to build and are working on and building a first-class distribution platform. And that platform will work with the principals, our partners throughout the region, And when opportunities come up, we will execute on those opportunities.
That's great.
I mean, you want the portfolio, you want the aspirational brands, you want your value for money, as the chairman said, our job is to make sure we are delivering to consumer needs, right? We're fulfilling consumer needs.
Yeah.
And, we have to face the reality of what exists. I mean, Guyana is probably going to have the largest GDP per capita. I mean, everybody was sheiks down there shortly, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's so their aspirations are very different from another market that has challenges. But if we can produce a competitive way and deliver great products for our consumers and eventually move them up that value chain, that's great. But we're not going to limit our ability to fulfill market demand across all the categories.
Yeah. And Richard, a lot of company CEOs on the JSE have 0 or nil shares in the top 10 report. You're unlike that. You're a top 10 shareholder in this baby. You're a top 10 shareholder in Seprod. I'm assuming a lot of your net worth or wealth is tied up in Seprod. I mean, it's probably an understatement to say you're bullish on Seprod. You got some shares in AS Bryden as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you have some minority shareholders in AS Bryden?
No, the acquisition was done is 60% Seprod, 40% other partners.
Okay.
And so management, etc., people like myself have shares in.
So you're bullish on this freight train going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's this is more than an employment at this stage. This is something I'm vested in. My family is vested in, and this is about being part of a legacy, right?
So it's like a partnership.
I mean, that's so the culture that we have is an employee culture. I mean, owner culture, and it's a partnership.
It's a partner. Look, I mean, there are very few organizations where there is transformation in the organization over the lifespan of 20, 25 years, where the management are not partners in the business. It's very, very rare. Our businesses throughout the Muslim Group, every single one that you will see on the listed stock exchange, whether it's PBS, which is also a regional distribution business right across the Caribbean and Central America. Pedro Paris is a significant shareholder. Sharon Donaldson, Nicholas Scott at Epley, and in other companies. We look at ourselves as an organization where talent comes first. And we want to attract the best talent. And it's not just about Richard being a shareholder of Seprod. In fact, I don't know the exact number, Richard, maybe you can help me. But
No, I won't.
but I believe, I think it's something like 20% of the employees of Seprod are shareholders.
Really?
And
the employees, right?
Yeah, employees of Seprod. And we deliberately...
You thought he was calling you out to your exact number of shares.
No, and we deliberately made a point because the ownership culture is super important. Yeah. And it's important that you can bring great talent into the organization, and that talent is worrying about the same things, and we're all aligned, and we can buy into that vision. And we're not talking about things for next week. We're talking about things for next year, the year after. And a lot of what we're doing now, we're executing on. Richard and I had written down on I wouldn't say, it's a bit cliche to say back of an envelope, but I don't know. We tend to write notes now on my book. I have a book, and we write notes, and then he takes a photograph of it. But when Richard first started working with us, we drew everything out what we wanted to do. Yeah. And we're executing on that.
So by the way, that's the same kind of ownership culture we intend to take to the Bryden's team.
Yeah. So you've been retaining persons, executives, and you've been seeing that now at AS Bryden with those subsidiary CEOs, which is great. Going forward, and giving you the close, AS Bryden, company that's going to be, based on that shareholder structure you just mentioned, 60-40. Company goes public. If it goes public, Jamaica Stock Exchange, given the liquidity here, the valuations, or is it like a dual listing?
I think it will definitely be a dual listing. Yeah. And we will be taking it public.
Definitely.
We will be
Okay.
listing it.
And Seprod will get that upside based on your structure?
Well, Seprod is a long-term investor.
It's a subsidiary.
It's a subsidiary,
Great.
and we will be.
So it's not a sister company, but it's in
It's
Seprod.
It is,
Okay.
and it will continue to be within Seprod. Many people ask, why do we have all these listed entities, etc. But having listed entities brings a lot of external discipline. It gives a lot of focus.
Yes.
It brings management into ownership in a way that's very material, and it also feels good, creating value. It's just paper. Sometimes you look at it and it's really not real or whatever, and it might not be real. You don't know, but you feel better when the shares are at $100 than 70, and I'm going to feel better when they're at 150, Richard. And believe me, he will as well.
And there's actually core earnings, and great cash flow.
And that's the other thing that's missed quite a bit. People need to look back and look at our cash flow, and we have invested incredibly heavily in the last 5 years. We've probably invested well over $100 million in Jamaica, in manufacturing facilities, redoing the biscuit plant, putting in a new margarine plant, doing the whole infrastructure in the dairy business to be able to
Fantastic.
form Suppligen and grow that business. And so there's a lot of depreciation and non-cash charges in our cash flow.
Yeah.
And so that is something that in the next year or two we've just finished building a 300,000 square foot distribution center. Well, we're not going to do that again next year.
No, of course.
So our cash flow is very strong, and we expect it to continually improve. Mm-hmm. And we have a very disciplined approach to dividends, and investors have seen that in the past. That will absolutely continue. Investors are aligned with management because we're all shareholders, and we are relying upon that dividend in one way or another. So we are about shareholder value. That's what we focus on when we get up in the morning, and return on equity. And we believe we have a excellent short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategy that will continue to develop and bring growth to the Seprod Group.
It's great to see. It's been great talking with both of you, and it's a pleasure to see the positive karma and the great working relationship that Chairman P.B. Scott of Seprod Group of Companies and CEO Richard Pandohie, the both of you have. You don't always see it on global markets or the Jamaica Stock Exchange or the Caribbean, but it's great seeing the karma that you guys have together in creating all of this shareholder value for the Seprod Group of Companies and for AS Bryden going forward. Thanks for joining us. It's really been a pleasure. That's it. It's a wrap for Seprod's Investor Briefing. It's Chairman P.B. Scott and CEO Richard Pandohie of Seprod Group of Companies and Interim CEO of AS Bryden, Sons and Holding Limited in Trinidad and Tobago. It's been great having them for Seprod's Investor Briefing. Thank you.